Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 2016's Ratchet and Clank, the re-envisioned remake of the weapon and bolt-filled action platformer classic, designed with a companion animated Hollywood film in mind.
Following that is a space exploration experience where disaster strikes every 22 minutes, featuring a soundtrack full of instruments you don't often associate with sci-fi, 2019's Outer Wilds.
Alright, so we're traveling to different planets through space this week.
We in space, buds.
That's right, otherwise rather different games in 2016's Ratchet and Clank and Outer Wilds, which I had always thought, I guess, was The Outer Wilds because The Outer Worlds came out that year and it was a source of much confusion in 2019, but no, Outer Wilds.
Yeah, until doing this research, I also thought the game was called The Outer Wilds. Despite the fact that before the research, I was playing the game.
Oh. Well, at least we can help clear that up for some people. Otherwise, Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
So, like I mentioned, I've been playing Outer Wilds, for a week. My goal was to finish it before we recorded, which I just barely did.
Yeah.
And we'll get into more of my thoughts when we get to that part of the show. Other than that, though, I loaded up Soul Hackers, and it's been my before bedtime game for the past few days, so it's pretty good. I had to restart because I don't remember anything. That I haven't touched a game in 2 years. So I started over, and we'll see if I have any more luck this time. But that's really all I've been playing.
So what you're saying is no Danganronpa.
I had to finish Outer Wilds.
Okay, maybe you'll get back to it. I don't know. I'm just saying I'm gonna press you over the next couple weeks at least. So I've been playing Mass Effect 2. I would say I'm probably at the 85% full completion mark. All the side missions are done. I have Tally's loyalty left. She's generally one of the harder checks, so you generally save her for the end. That is before Reaper IFF and all the fun endgame stuff there. And then, I also have Overlord to do because I got to factor in all the DLC. Firewalker, I had never played that DLC from Mass Effect 2. Boy, that was not good. But there's Overlord to still do before Reaper IFF. And then after credits roll, Lair, the Shadow Broker, and Arrival. So still got some good chunks of that game left before I move on to the last in that trilogy. Really enjoying it, though.
Hearing about it just continues to make me be like, I want to replay Mass Effect, but there's too much coming out. I can't. For the next 2 months, there's too much.
Oh, it's getting crazy, that's for sure. But in the meantime, let's talk about some composer follow-up news. Lots happening in the game industry, especially when it comes to tying in the composers that we've talked about on the show before. I think one of the hottest bit of news topics that dropped this past week is Nintendo announcing their E3 2021 plans. At noon Eastern on Tuesday, June 15th, they will have their E3 Nintendo Direct full of software that is aiming to be released in 2021. So, with all the rumors flying around, as of this point of recording, there has been nothing announced as far as Switch Pro or whatever it will be called. So maybe soon after recording, by the time you hear this, maybe we'll know something. There's thoughts of on Friday, June 4th, that there are retail listings for it. Joe, what do you think it's gonna be called? Do you think we're gonna get a hardware announcement before Nintendo's E3 showcase?
I think it's going to be called the new Nintendo Switch 2, and everybody's going to be very confused when it's not actually a new console, it's just a beefier Switch. Because I don't trust Nintendo to name things anymore. The Switch is the first good name they've come up with in years, and I know they're going to ruin it, so...
Yeah, you can't hit that back to back. Just call it Super Nintendo Switch and be done with it. I think that's everyone's best case scenario, but I think you're right, that won't happen. Switch Pro is fine, but just don't do like new Nintendo Switch. Don't do new Nintendo Switch Pro. Don't do Nintendo Switch Plus. You could see it getting messy in a variety of ways, but I think it'll happen. I think the report's saying that companies at E3 want to show games that take advantage of this system and at least be able to say that it's for this system. I think Nintendo as well. I mean, when you're talking about the sequel to Breath of the Wild, if you have anything to say this year about that game, like that's got to be targeted for an enhanced Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, I could see that. Chicory, A Colorful Tale, is coming out on June 10th. And I'm very excited. That is the coloring book sort of game where you can paint different objects around the world. And we bring it up because the soundtrack is by Lena Raine of Celeste fame. And I'm very, very excited for this game. I played the demo last year at some point, and it blew me away. It was fantastic. And I'm very excited to see how the whole game sort of comes out. And Lena Raine has been pushing it since the release date was announced, to the point where she did a listen-along on Twitch of the first 5-6 tracks on the soundtrack. I didn't get to see it because I was at work, and I haven't had a chance to go look up the VOD, but that sounds really cool, and I'm glad she's doing stuff like that.
It's out there if you're curious, so definitely go check that out. We talked about last episode that we were on the precipice of Dragon Quest and Sonic news and Horizon Forbidden West and all that. Well, probably the biggest story out of that Sonic Direct Showcase, whatever they did call it, that's not coming to me right now. Sonic Colors Ultimate is a remastered version of that original Nintendo Wii game from 2010. So Sonic Colors Ultimate will be out on September 7th. One of the main composers on that soundtrack was Tomoya Otani, who we've covered on the show before. And we just happen to have an episode of Original Soundchat that releases on September 7th. So you could probably guess what one of the games covered that week will be.
What could it be? My guess is Mario World. Also, though, in the same day, sort of, well, not in the same day, but the night before for us, the Dragon Quest stuff, they're doing an HD 2D remake of Dragon Quest 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks awesome. Final Fantasy VI next, guys, okay? Cool? Can we all agree on that? Final Fantasy VI next.
Chrono Trigger sometime after that, at least in the next several years. We can be patient, Square.
Those are all free money, guys. Have my people call your people. But also, I don't think I played a lot of Sonic Colors when it first came out. I'm pretty sure I bought it at one point.
Oh, it's real fun.
It's one of those games that's it lives on the Wii, and that's the only way you can play it. And if you want to play it any other way, get out of here. And this is going to fix that. Thank God.
Also, there's going to be a Sonic Origins game in 2022. That kind of bundles all of the original Genesis, Sega CD kind of games together. So that should be exciting. Should be more interesting to see what happens with the Sonic 3 and Knuckles soundtrack.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of shocked that something like that didn't already exist.
Mm-hmm,
was Sega really looking at Capcom and all the Mega Man collections and not going we could do that? I don't know. A new release, though, which came completely out of left field. They didn't hype it up or anything. It was just, hey, our game's out now. A new game called Overboard by the developers of Heaven's Vault. As far as I could tell, the composer that we covered for Heaven's Vault, he is not involved, I don't think. He hasn't tweeted about it. In fact, he hasn't tweeted since March.
Yeah, I hope all is well with Lawrence Chapman there.
Yeah, I hope he is well. But Overboard looks really neat. It's a game where you murder your husband and then you have to figure out how to get somebody else to take the fall for murdering your husband. It sounds great. I haven't had a chance to play it yet because there's a lot of stuff coming out and money's already spoken for in a lot of ways, but I'm going to play it for the end of the year. I'm very happy to see them come out with another game so quickly.
And then to wrap things up, Herman Hulst, who's the head of Sony Worldwide Studios, had a big 20-minute interview, and a whole bunch of Sony tidbits were dropped. Most notably, and not surprisingly, the next God of War game has been delayed to 2022. Shocker, Legasp, all that. But it's apparently also going to be coming to PlayStation 4 as well, which is interesting. I get it. Have the big install base there, make the money. It makes sense on a business decision front, but you just hope that the game design vision isn't restricted in any way by an outdated... If you're going to run on a launch 2013 PS4, there's going to be some restrictions that have to be made there. Maybe it's, I don't know, got to be 7, 20, 30 frames per second. I don't know. Kind of crazy there.
There's a massive gap between those two platforms, and I'm very intrigued to see, especially for God of War and Horizon, because those games are big open world games, which, is gonna be more taxing. Gran Turismo looks very pretty, but it's at the end of the day, it's just a racing game.
Mm-hmm.
But the open world games are where it's gonna really get taxing, and yeah, I'm very interested to see how they're gonna handle that.
Yeah, as you note, Horizon Forbidden West and Gran Turismo 7 also getting that PS4 and PS5 treatment. Sony notes that they're aiming to have Horizon Forbidden West out this holiday, but that is uncertain. Read between the lines, likely getting delayed. So just keep that in your mind. But they did put out a new video feature talking about the musicians behind the game, the composers. So Joris de Man is going to be joined by a few other composers, including the duo The Flight. That's pretty neat. They have the Isle of Spires EP out now for streaming if you want to get a taste of a few tracks from Horizon Forbidden West. Also of note from that Sony big news drop is that Team Asobi, the group behind the Astrobot series, they are growing. They're now an internal Sony Worldwide Studio team after being a branch of Sony Japan, and they are developing a new global all-ages intellectual property. Same thing with the new intellectual property, Sony Bend, the team who made Days Gone, also with a new IP in the works. Which makes people wonder, is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart the only first-party PlayStation 5 experience left this year? It might be.
Probably.
I guess when stock of PlayStation 5 is a little short right now because of the global semiconductor crisis, you don't have to worry about it as much.
For the most part, it's both the fact that so many people just can't get a hold of a PlayStation 5. I still don't know how my roommate did it. He sold his soul to the devil or something. But also just... we kind of already knew that a bunch of games that were slated for this year were probably not coming out this year because, the pandemic slowed a lot of stuff down. And God of War specifically getting delayed. That felt like a definitive, it begins moment. I feel like we're going to see a lot more announcements like that in the coming months.
But honestly, also, Sony Santa Monica can take however long they want to. It will be worth it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Ratchet and Clank, though, let's talk about our first game this week, which is 2016's Ratchet and Clank. It is the 15th installment in the Ratchet and Clank series.
That series has way more games than I expected. Wow.
So this one is the 9th in the main series, and they've had some spin-offs since then. But yeah, I think first time we're talking about a Ratchet and Clank game, which is interesting that we're finally getting to that. Some history, I guess, behind then the Ratchet and Clank series. Insomniac Games wanted to work on a new intellectual property after the Spyro the Dragon trilogy, whose rights were owned elsewhere. So it's the year 2000. The PlayStation 2 era is here, and so Insomniac needs a new idea. They had an idea, it was called Monster Knight, and it never got past the prototyping stage. And then they had a second idea called Girl with a Stick, and it aimed to be a mashup of Zelda and Tomb Raider, and it was canceled after 6 months of development work. So now we're here in 2001, and the idea is floated of an alien that travels from planet to planet collecting weapons and gadgets. And this inspired the team since it would allow them to create new worlds and characters to develop. So artists sketched a number of concepts for this alien character who was originally reptilian, but he ended up being this new humanoid, furry, cat-like species that they called a Lombax. And they named this character Ratchet. They also gave him a robotic companion that they called Clank, who was originally developed as a childlike version of C-3PO from Star Wars, but they later decided that Ratchet and Clank should work like a buddy cop film. They should be equals to each other. And thus the first Ratchet and Clank game came out in 2002, and it was a big enough hit to create this big, massive franchise that we know today. So the 2016 Ratchet and Clank game was released on April 12th, 2016 in North America on PlayStation 4. The PAL regions got it on the 20th, but the UK in particular got it on April 22nd. It was recently available for free during March 2021 as part of Sony's Play at Home campaign, and it is currently part of the PlayStation Plus collection for PlayStation 5 owners that have PS Plus. You get this whole library of PlayStation 4 games. Now, this is a remake of that original 2002 Ratchet and Clank game, but it also ties in directly with the Ratchet and Clank animated movie, which retells the events of the original game. So this 2016 game is based on a movie that's based on a game. You got it? Good. All right.
That's some Street Fighter, the movie, the game shenanigans if I've ever seen them.
Honestly, it is. I think it was even released in Japan as Ratchet and Clank, the game. Like, so go figure. Overall, the story is updated. It expands on the original lore. It introduces many characters and elements that didn't appear until later games in the series, kind of merges some planets and characters together, but overall roughly follows the same structure and plot events. This game is developed by Insomniac Games and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Ratchet & Clank is a third-person action-adventure game with elements of platforming, shooting, and puzzle solving. It features an arsenal of up to 15 weapons taken from previously released games in the series, along with some new additions. It could be your simple gun, like the Combustor. There's the new weapon, the Pixelizer, which makes the enemies you're fired upon look 8-bit. Or there's something like the Groovatron, which throws out a disco ball and makes all the enemies dance. There's even the Sheepinator. You can turn enemies into sheep. It's great. Overall, as Ratchet, the player navigates diverse environments, defeats enemies with that array of different weapons and gadgets, and traverses obstacles. Clank, meanwhile, is attached to Ratchet like a backpack, and he performs several functions, like he allows for diving into water, gliding through the use of propellers, and on occasion acting as a jetpack to allow for flight. Clank also gets some gameplay sections of his own, and they're drastically different since he isn't equipped with any weapons, so his sections mostly revolve around solving environmental puzzles with small gadget robots rather than defeating enemies. So the story of the remake of the game that's also told through the movie involves the game being told from the perspective of the character Captain Quark, who is the newly imprisoned former commander of the legendary Galactic Rangers. And he retells the story told in the Ratchet and Clank movie, which in turn tells an updated version of the story told from the original Ratchet and Clank game. All right, so his recounting follows the adventures of Ratchet, who is a Lombax mechanic on the planet Veldin, and he wishes to explore the Solana galaxy. He soon meets a robot named Clank, a warbot defect created in a Blarg factory on planet Quartu. After meeting each other, the two aspire to join the Galactic Rangers, which is a group commissioned by President Phyronix and led by Captain Quark. That way, they can together stop the Blarg chairman Alonzo Drek and his scientist Dr. Nefarious from destroying planets throughout the galaxy. The main big question, can Ratchet and Clank stop Drek and Nefarious from using their deplanetizer to destroy worlds and harvest their materials? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Ratchet and Clank, specifically this 2016 game?
Well, even if it wasn't specifically just the 2016 game, I got nothing. I have never played a Ratchet and Clank game of any kind, ever. Which is weird because I grew up with PS2, and you'd think that would have come up at some point, but no, I've just never played any Ratchet and Clank anything. I've never seen the movie. I've never played Heroes on the Move, which he and Clank are in, with
Jack and Dexter and Sly and Bentley. Yeah.
I think seeing the trailer for that and seeing trailers for Rift Apart every time they talk about it in regards to it being on PS5 and being basically the only exclusive they have left for the year 2021, that's really it.
And that's interesting because I also, like when I had a PS2, oh gosh, like late 2000s, like way after the PS2's heyday, but Ratchet and Clank was a game I got and yet never sat down and played. So this 2016 game is the only Ratchet and Clank game I have played. So I think it's a good entry point. You don't have to know too much about the series going in, honestly. And if you want to just jump into this one fresh, it's a great way to do so. And easy entry points if you're in that PlayStation ecosystem. Like to have it be part of the PlayStation Plus collection, yeah, super, super easy.
I had completely forgotten it was on the PlayStation Select's service, so I might need to install it on certain people's PS5s to give it a shot.
Yeah, especially if you're going to give the sequel a go with Rift Apart. I think that's a good thing to do. It's probably something I need to go back and replay because I remembered very little about it. I know I enjoyed it, but I got burned by a final boss difficulty spike, which is frustrating to then like go back and look and be like, what problems did I have with it? And then like different guides are like, he's really easy. Just keep moving around and keep shooting. Like, well, obviously I had some difficulty with him that frustrated me. Like it was similar to Wolfenstein Youngblood, actually, where I played that in co-op with my brother and we played it on easy. And yeah, going through the game, fine, great, good time. And then suddenly the final boss is just like way harder for some reason, or at least perceived that way. So I think I do need to go back and play Ratchet & Clank 2016 before Rift Apart comes out very soon. As of time of release of this episode. Wow. Can't believe it's already there. The year of 2021 is just zooming by in a haze.
Yeah, I don't like it. I needed to stop. It's got to cut that out.
Yeah, for sure. But I did have good memories of playing it overall. So it was neat to learn about it. Again, kind of some of the behind the scenes look, especially when Insomniac have referred to this game as a new beginning for the Ratchet & Clank series, calling it a chance to create what we imagined when we started was a curated first Ratchet experience. So yeah, great place to enter the series if you're new to it overall. Also notable that James Arnold Taylor and David Kaye returned to reprise their roles as Ratchet and Clank. So interesting when they have the animated movie and they try to get all these Hollywood voice talents in there, different celebrities, Rosario Dawson, Sylvester Stallone, Paul Giamatti, and then here's the original voices of Ratchet and Clank, at least in there to keep things normal. So James Arnold Taylor has voiced Ratchet in every game since the second game. He wasn't the original Ratchet voice in the very first game, but since the second game onward, when they tried to make him like less of a jerk, so they gave him this voice, and he has quite the voiceover history. James Arnold Taylor also played Tidus in Final Fantasy X. He is the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the animated Star Wars media, such as the Clone Wars. He's seemingly also the current voice of Fred Flintstone and George Jetson, which is interesting.
They have the same voice actor now?
I guess there's enough to differentiate them or like be talented enough to do that. But Joe, he's also the bad Jack Sparrow in Kingdom Hearts 2.
Oh, boy. That dude got thrown under the bus with the voice direction on that one.
He sure did. And also many more voiceover roles. David Kaye has had an equally prolific voiceover career, with notable appearances as Megatron in 5 Transformers series, Sesomaru in Inuyasha, and he is the voice of the announcer for HBO's Last Week Tonight with John Oliver.
That's an odd... All right, cool. Fine. All right.
It's a different vocal quality altogether. That announcer is like, and now, like the deep voice, whatever. But Clank is a little more mechanically processed and a little higher pitched. But yeah, that's David Kaye. So the longtime design director on Ratchet & Clank, Brian Allgeier, and the Ratchet & Clank Future series writer, TJ Fixman, were brought in for this project. And they had the idea to tell the story of the game through Captain Quark's point of view, which kind of freed up the ability to tell the story without being too bound to the film, whose story had been so heavily changed by Hollywood writers and executives, as they do in Hollywood, that it was no longer compatible with the lore of the games. So this was meant as kind of an added commentary on the film story to tell it from Quark's point of view, and it wasn't set out to rework the canon. It was their way of calling it, quote, just a cleaner retelling of sorts. Yes, so this game was developed in parallel with this Ratchet & Clank animated film that was headed up by Rainmaker Entertainment. And so Insomniac and Rainmaker shared the same character models, environments, animation, and some writing. Some cutscenes in the game were like basically the same from the movie. Insomniac would send over a model. Rainmaker would kind of tweak it up a little bit and then send it back to Insomniac. They'd work in some ways together there. There is a great Gama Sutra postmortem if you'd like to read a reflection of what went right and what went wrong with development. But let's just say that being tied to this film in development at the same time was certainly a unique hurdle for this game. Overall, the Ratchet & Clank remake was announced at E3 2014. They planned to release the game in 2015, but it was delayed to 2016 to line up with the film release. Ended up releasing on April 29th. For retrospect, the game released on April 12th in North America. So even then, there were big stress points to make sure that things were lining up overall and they were going to be releasing on time. The film was a critical and commercial failure, grossing just $14 million worldwide on a $20 million budget.
Yep. I remember that.
It's probably why you didn't see it, why I didn't see it. But the game reviewed well, with a Metacritic average of 85. It was seen as a remarkable from-scratch remake at the time. Critics praised the overall gameplay, the controls, the visuals, which many compared to being Pixar-like, the weapons, and the world design. Some critiques involved some slower gameplay sections that kind of break up the pacing, and what they call a, quote, underbaked story. Again, when it's kind of tied to this movie that makes changes, and then you're going back to a 2002 game, that's kind of maybe why. But overall, weird to be tied to that film that didn't do so well.
Has anything ever been done like that before? Obviously there are shovelware games that used to come out that were movie tie-ins all the time. You don't see those as often nowadays, but they used to be all over the place, but never a game and a movie being made in tandem. I don't think that's something that anything else has ever done.
Yeah, especially aiming for AAA. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
To be honest, it doesn't surprise me that one of those flopped and the other kinda didn't. 'Cause Ratchet and Clank fans they like the games. Why are they gonna go see a movie when the game tells the exact same story?
Yeah, I'm just glad, honestly, that both didn't flop. And it was interesting that the game released at a $40 price point, which is notable in what was, time of $60 games. Now we're at $70 for PlayStation 5, and it hurts a little bit, but not as much as in the UK. Have you seen some of those exchange rates of how a 69, 70 pound game is like a $97 in the United States equivalent?
Oh, it's the same in Canada. I hear from Canadian people all the time that games are like $100 there.
That's wild. It's not fair, honestly. But yeah, $40 at the time, really good for the consumer. And then even still, it became the best-selling and most successful game in Insomniac history, according to James Stevenson, who I think is still the community director there, but at least he was at the time when he made that kind of statement. But that was before a little 2018 game called Spider-Man rolled around, because that broke some even more records there at Insomniac. It's hard to pin down specific sales numbers, especially with all of the free and bundled promotions in the last several months. But yeah, Insomniac's real happy with how that 2016 Ratchet Clank game did. The game won Family Game of the Year at the DICE Awards. It was nominated for Best Action Adventure Game and Best Family Game at the Game Awards, lost to Dishonored 2 and Pokemon Go respectively. And it was nominated for Best Family Game at the BAFTAs, losing out to Overcooked. The legacy of the game, Insomniac used the game's engine as a foundation for the studio's next big console game project, which was Marvel's Spider-Man. Today, Insomniac is firing on all cylinders. You had a sequel to the Spider-Man game in Miles Morales, and now a sequel to Ratchet & Clank titled Rift Apart. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart launches this Friday, June 11th, 2021, as a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Just who is composing the soundtrack for Rift Apart, you may wonder? Well, you'll have to tune in next week to learn more. But the composer for this game, for Ratchet & Clank 2016, is credited to Michael Bross. Michael Bross was born in Sheffield, which is a small town in western Pennsylvania, did not disclose his birth date. Even in an interview when they tried to press him for it, he's like, I'll just keep some secrets to myself. Fair, honestly, on the internet. He first started playing trumpet when he was 7 years old, but then he also plays keyboards, percussion, and some guitar. He also likes to doodle, so he draws a little bit as a side hobby. He got his Bachelor of Arts in Music Performance from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he was first hired by Paragon Software as a composer in 1992. He said he was hired out of 125 entrants for the job. His first game there was titled XF5700 Mantis Experimental Fighter. I've never heard of that. And then he moved on to Micropose to work on games titled Return of the Phantom and Dragon Sphere. He had an interview from 2007 where he noted, quote, "The good news is that the quality of music in games is getting better and better, and I think that trend will continue. As far as who will be creating that music, I think it will be more like the film industry, where much of the music comes from freelancers." Ding, ding, ding. Spot on prediction, sir. Although, yeah, you do have the big names. You do also have a lot of people kind of starting up and being freelancers and creating these great soundtracks. So Michael Bross got into the Ratchet & Clank series through the lead sound designer, Jamie McManamy, who worked with him on his previously big game project, the Oddworld series. In his bio on his website, he says, quote, "He sculpts a sound that traverses the serene to the haunted. He conjures rhythmic murmurs, dusty atmospheres, and ponderous flights amidst the ethereal." You can follow Michael Bross on social media at Bross Music. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, usually at Bross Music. His SoundCloud is at Michael_Bross. And his website is at bross.com, BROSS.com. So his discography, when he started on the Oddworld series, he contributed music to Munch's Odyssey, Stranger's Wrath, New and Tasty, and I think he also is credited on Soulstorm, the one that just recently came out.
All right, that did come out, didn't it? I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was like a PlayStation Plus game a month or two ago, so that's there. In Ratchet and Clank, he started on All for One, also contributed to Full Frontal Assault, Into the Nexus, and the 2016 game. Then he composed for Edge of Nowhere, which was an Insomniac VR game that they made for Oculus. He composed music on Firefall, which is an MMO first-person shooter game. Also contributed to World of Tanks and World of Warplanes, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Honor of Kings, which we know here as Arena of Valor, some Oculus games called Prologue, First Contact, and Home 2.0, and most recently, a game project was Saint Seiya Awakening, which is a mobile game produced by Tencent. He's also done his own music, releasing 6 albums and 3 EPs, the most recent being Oceans from 2020 and Journeys 1 EP, also from 2020. So when it comes to the development of the Ratchet & Clank 2016 soundtrack, there's a lot of comparison made to the original score from 2002, and that was composed by DeVader. But this score takes a wholly new approach. The original game, a lot of electronic beats, but this game has more orchestration overall, because Bros thinks that Ratchet & Clank, quote, requires a score that is epic but also laced with humor. So there's a lot of play between those two sides. It also has this fairy tale influence, but futuristic. It covers a range of emotions, but there's lightness to it. He says, of course I wanted to capture that recognizable Ratchet & Clank sound that was so essential to the franchise, but while this game is based off the original, there are a lot of new, fresh elements in this game. It really is its own game. And so there are new music ideas introduced too. I would say there's just a lot of orchestration in this game, and then using some electronic sounds to kind of call back to those classic elements. Because, yeah, you're going off this big Hollywood feature film, you kind of want an orchestrated score, but at the same time, it is a game. You have to kind of mix in what it came from. So I think it's a really, really neat sound overall. Michael Bross said that he worked remotely and that Insomniac provided video captures where it was needed so he could understand the context of where certain things were playing, but he really didn't see it pulled all together until the end, and he was really happy with how it turned out. One of the most important things, though, I think that I had kind of, I guess, realized but never put any significant amount of thought to, what's the theme to Ratchet and Clank? You know, Halo has its main theme. Uncharted has its main theme. Apparently, by Insomniac's request and their overall decision, Ratchet and Clank doesn't have a franchise theme overall. Each game has its theme, like a main theme music, but nothing for the series, and I found that super interesting.
I did not know that. That is very interesting, especially when there are 15 games on that list.
Right, you gotta keep coming up with some new ideas. So let's hear what that main theme is, starting as we get into the 5 critical tracks for Ratchet and Clank 2016. Let's get into critical track number 1, Title Screen. As you may have guessed, this theme plays on the title screen. Also important to note, this soundtrack does not seem to have an officially released soundtrack, which I would have thought, of course it does. But the film does, not necessarily the game, and so I had to go through a game rip of almost 200 tracks. It was an ordeal, let's say that. But I do remember this song, certainly while playing the game. being the main theme on the title screen. It's a piece that overall starts with a slower orchestral opening, but the clip here shows when it picks up, especially with this trombone melody that's later continued by the trumpet. And I feel like it's a fanfare for the hero that Ratchet aspires to be. So once again, this is definitely a case where this is a main theme for the game that was created for this game in particular, because there isn't really a franchise leitmotif to build off of. And I feel like it's good at kind of building and establishing that heroic energy.
Yeah, it's a really cool fanfare that does, you are correct, do a really good job of the heroic energy. I'm just stuck on thinking, like, this is the game you'd think would be the most likely to have an original soundtrack release. Because it's a movie tie-in, and I bet you the movie had an official soundtrack release.
Yeah, absolutely it did. And it was like 17 tracks or something like that. Much more reasonable. But yeah, couldn't use that one.
That's really weird.
It was a different composer for the film altogether, too.
Yeah, because I was looking on Spotify, and there is a Ratchet & Clank 2016 original soundtrack album on here, but I'm going to assume that is the movie, now that you say that, by Evan Wise and Jingle Punks.
Yeah.
So that did get an official release, but the game didn't. That is absolutely bizarre.
Let's just say it made research frustrating for sure.
I can imagine so.
Let's move on to the next critical track, though, and this is Kaisel Plateau, Velden. So this plays on Velden, which is the first world of the game. It's Ratchet's home planet. And this definitely continues that sound with the orchestral instrumentation, slowly mixing in some of the electronic beats and synths, especially as you hear at the end of the clip. I think this is especially noticeable because fans of the original Ratchet & Clank game would note that this is totally different from that game's Velden theme. That one's a little more dark, definitely more electronic. And this one is open. It's positive. It's exciting, which I feel like in a modern game here, especially when you're kind of mixing in tutorials and especially bringing in a new Ratchet & Clank audience with this game that they hope would be tied in through the movie, but not necessarily so, in if how the movie didn't do so well. But you're really learning the foundations of the gameplay here. And it's a good, catchy, positive piece that really gets the game going on the right foot.
Yeah, I really like it. It kind of has the sound of, like, the orchestral parts sound kind of Ghibli-ish to me, like almost Joe Hisaishi with the strings and all that. But man, when those electronic parts come in, that's super cool. And obviously that's not Ghibli at all. I feel like Joe Hisaishi would burst into flames if you looked at a synthesizer. But like, yeah, this is a really, really nice piece. It feels like a tutorial piece.
Yeah.
Which makes it even weirder that the original game had a darker tone for this area. I don't know. Bizarre, but this is a very, very good piece.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of good memories for those who played this game and kind of opening up in this area with just, open positive energy. But that heroic fanfare returns a little bit here in number 3 on the Critical 5. This is Aliro City, Kirwan. Kerwan, however it is pronounced. It's been a while since I played the game. I probably should have looked up how they pronounce it in game. This is the third planet in the game, featuring the Hall of Heroes, which is the headquarters of the Galactic Rangers. And yeah, you definitely get some more exciting orchestration here. This is a great sounding piece, and I love how the electronic synth bass comes in to supplement that sound. Like, it's a really good fusion of that. Like, the orchestration is still being heroic, being triumphant. You know, the Galactic Rangers, this is their home base. This is the place where Ratchet starts to make a name for himself. And so you have to have that driven by the orchestra. But it's also a futuristic city. So you have to have that electronic sound kind of mixed in. And this is at the point where I start hearing, I'm like, I get vibes of like Star Fox Assault, another game we've covered on this show. Now, granted, that was in like GameCube sampling times, but if you like reorchestrated that soundtrack, it could sound pretty similar, I think.
Yeah, I could see the comparison to Star Fox Assault, but the electronic, like, warbling bits in the background of all the orchestral stuff is just, I think that makes it like, this is my favorite song on the Critical 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so interesting and cool. I don't know. I can't think of another game that sounds exactly like this in general. It's really, really neat.
Yeah, you're here for adventure, and it's really starting to set in on this planet and with this piece. I also wanted to note this one here, though, number 4 on the Critical 5. This is the Blackwater City Sewers. All right, so this takes place in Blackwater City on the planet Rilgar, which is the 5th planet. So you're kind of like almost at the halfway through point of the game. And I feel like this one was most notable because, I mean, we're breaking away from the orchestra here, right? That this is so electronic here. It kind of sounds grimy for being in the sewers. You do get some strings in the background, right? So the orchestration is hardly there, almost like there's the city on the outside, but we're here in the muck. And this is seemingly a favorite track amongst fans of the original game because they think it sounds closest to Bergeau's original score. And I agree. It sounds totally different. Hearing some of the original Ratchet Clank pieces, I'm not saying this like sounds closest to what Bergeau originally wrote for Rilgar, for this area, but just the overall vibe of the music that Bergeau originally wrote sounds pretty similar to this. And if you think about it, it does kind of have a early 2000s retro game feel in a way. Oh my gosh, I just said early 2000s retro. You know you're getting old when. Oh my God.
Oh no, it is retro now.
It's almost 20 years. Oh my goodness. But you know what I mean? Like, it's not like 90s, game sounding, but like this kind of electronic MIDI synthy sound, it has a different vibe to it, especially compared to the other tracks we've heard so far.
See, when I hear this song, my brain immediately goes to Metal Gear. Mm-hmm. It sounds like the song that would play in a Metal Gear game when the guards are actively looking for you. That's all I can hear. And that's a good thing. Like, those are fantastic pieces of the soundtrack. But yeah, that's immediately where my mind goes.
And I think that's very accurate. I could hear that for sure. Let's wrap up the Critical 5, though, with the final boss. This is Nefarious Supernova. What? The evil scientist was behind all the evil tech plans all along, not the chairman who was just the money front face? Look, it's not that much of a spoiler, let's be honest. Dr. Nefarious is the final boss of this game. He's the main antagonist for the next game. So if you're seeing Ratchet Clank Rift Apart stuff and it's like, oh, the Nefarious Empire, yeah, that's kind of why. Apparently Dr. Nefarious as a character, though, was not in the original Ratchet Clank games. He was more like in the future sort of series of games, I think. And so it's kind of a showing that it's like the merging of things together here in this way. But yeah, we're back to the orchestration with this piece. And, you know, one that plays on the final boss, one that I had such trouble with. And yeah, hearing it brought me right back there. But yeah, the orchestration is here. This time, though, it has these high stakes to it. And you get some of the dark chords and progressions kind of mixing in like a nefarious leitmotif in there. I love that drop in the clip that comes back with this electronic hit there. It's a really, really cool moment. I think it's appropriate to wrap up with that final boss, which I've seen is like when they updated the game for PlayStation 5 and they gave it 60 frames per second support, some of the haptic rumble features, I think, as well. So definitely play Ratchet & Clank 2016 on PS5 if you can. But I think I've seen some clips where it's like before you beat him, technically, like it can jump and skip and act like you have. Like there's some weird glitches there. I don't know if they patched that out, but it just makes me more frustrated. It's like, oh yeah, that happens. And I, for whatever reason, couldn't beat him back when I played it.
This is a very close second to being my favorite song on the Critical 5. That being said, you mentioned it's not that big of a spoiler that this is the villain. His name is Dr. Nefarious.
It's like built to be the big villain.
It could only be more obvious if his name was Mr. Badman. Like, that's it.
I mean, that's Kojima territory. We don't want to encroach
that's
there.
Kojima. Kojima gets to name his characters those things. But Dr. Nefarious, come on. They're screaming at you that he's evil. But yeah, this, for some reason, when I hear this song, I think of, because there aren't actually a lot of these, but like, this is what I would expect from a 3D animated sort of action movie. And this being the climax, it really, really, even without knowing that's what it is, it really, really brings in that, you know, that feeling. It really hits that vibe perfectly. It is really good, very hype, very epic. I love it.
I feel like that's this game's soundtrack in a nutshell. Like, it's really good action music, but it doesn't lean in so much on like a melody or like something that'll be an earworm. It's really good supporting action music. And I feel like if that's what you like with your soundtracks, you'll totally find it here. But those who aspire to a more retro melody driven soundtrack, that's not exactly what this is. For tracks on the cutting room floor, I have a couple, and I feel like these fit perfectly as tracks on the cutting room floor because they play a lower sort of importance in the game. First of these is Pause Menu. Color me surprised, and I think anyone who played this game, when you paused the game and you kind of cut from the big bombastic orchestral soundtrack, it wasn't that muted. Oh no, the pause menu has its own music. It's just not what I would have expected at all. But here it is. It's this kind of ethereal sounding jam with the synths and then the orchestral chords that cut in. So it's, again, a good blending of that, but a little more leaning on the electronic here. It's not, Battletoads, boots, boots, boots. It's, it's its own piece, but yeah, Pause Menu has its own theme.
There aren't a lot of games that do that anymore. Honestly, I don't think there were a lot of games that did that in the first place. Like DK64 does it, and that's the only game coming to mind for me. I don't know. This song's really weird. I don't know if I dig it that much. Something about the electronic part just, The like little synth bells. I'm not a big fan, but I mean, I guess for a pause menu, it makes sense. Sure.
It's unique that it's there, and I figured it was worth noting that. And then we got to talk about some of the weirdness of Ratchet's arsenal. This other one on the cutting room floor here is Groovatron F. When you deploy the Groovatron and you make your enemies dance and disco, there seem to be about like 6 tracks or so that can play. And this one stuck out the most to me as one I remembered the most. All of them are good, but this one slaps pretty hard with some dubstep here. And so this kind of gives you a bit of a sound of what comes into the soundtrack when you deploy the Groovatron.
Every time I hear about the Groovatron, all I can think of is in Saints Row 4, where you can get the dubstep gun that makes people explode through use of dubstep.
I mean, it's not entirely different.
Music-based weapons are really fun, it turns out.
Go figure. I don't know if it beats turning your opponents into sheep, but it's pretty good. So what will I never forget about 2016's Ratchet and Clank? For me, apparently it's that final boss. Fighting Nefarious as he's flying around in a lava area and he's destroying platforms that you need to get jetpack refuelings on. That apparently I just run out of jetpack fuel and I'm on a platform when it's falling away and I just die. Cool. 1 hit, gone. Thanks. Bye. So no, apparently it's really easy though, and I just gotta keep moving and keep firing and keep hitting him. Okay. Well, maybe when I revisit it, I am gonna get Rift Apart for sure. I'm excited to play that, but I probably should revisit Ratchet and Clank 2016 just to get in the flow with that gameplay again. And it's a solid game for sure.
I will one day play it. Maybe. Who knows? Probably. Statistically not, though. Let's be real. I don't have a great track record.
Well, to transition to our next game, I would say we're going to talk about a cover, a remix that a fan's done, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, something off the soundtrack. But, it's really tough when this doesn't have a soundtrack, for one. And there's just a big game rip of all these songs, so I couldn't find any remix. Honestly, if anything, it's like, oh yeah, Veldin remix of the 2002 Ratchet and Clank one that's more suited to electronic music. Okay, yeah, got it. Perfect, thanks. So we're just going to include another song off the soundtrack here. And after you get out of the Blackwater City sewers and you kind of fix the problem that's going on there on Rilgar, you get to have a hoverboard race. And this is seemingly that theme. This is Off to the Races. And we will be right back.
So real quick, before we jump into it, there are people that will tell you that it's best for the experience of this game if you go in knowing the initial twist naturally. I personally don't think it takes away from it. I knew the twist before I played the game, and I still liked it enough to get to an ending. So if that is something that is important to you, and you are planning on playing Outer Wilds, maybe skip this part of the episode. But again, I personally don't think it takes that much away, personally. But it's up to you. So just a heads up on that. Anyways, let's talk about Outer Wilds. It was originally released for PC on May 28th, 2019, with an Xbox One release following the next day on May 29th. Released on PlayStation 4 on October 15th, 2019. And of course, it is currently set to release on Switch this summer, so it could come out any month now, for all we know.
Maybe on the next Nindies showcase, they'll be like, and it's out today.
Maybe, who knows? So it was developed by Mobius Digital Games and published by Annapurna Interactive, who always has a home run for me personally, it seems. They are quickly becoming my favorite indie publisher. It is a first-person adventure game set in a small solar system that can be explored using mostly accurate spacefaring physics. Like when you are flying, you gotta worry about, are you getting pulled into the orbit of this planet? If you fly too close to the sun, it's just gonna pull you into the sun and you're gonna die. That kind of thing. There is no combat. You don't get a gun. Everything is entirely built around the act of exploring the various planets that are orbiting this solar system's sun. So, you, the player, take control of an astronaut who is preparing for their first launch as part of the space program for their home planet, the forested Timber Hearth. You are part of a species referred to as the Hearthians. Also in orbit around the sun are multiple other planets, such as the oceanic Giant's Deep, which I really, really like, because it's a planet covered in water, but there are like 4 islands floating in the water, and there are a bunch of tornadoes that are always going, and when one catches one of the islands, it throws it out of the atmosphere, and then pulls it back down into the water, which is really neat. You also have Brittle Hollow, which is literally a hollow, falling apart planet with a black hole in the middle of it, which is straight out of Mario Galaxy if you really think about it. It also has the Hourglass Twins, being Ash Twin and Ember Twin, which are 2 small planets that are orbiting each other, and they sort of pour this huge amount of sand back and forth between each other. It's very, very interesting. And of course, there is the dangerous Dark Bramble, which is scary, and I don't like the Dark Bramble, but we'll get to that later. There are a few other, more mysterious celestial bodies that you can explore, but I'll leave it at that. So you are the first astronaut to be sent out to explore with a device capable of translating the language of the Nomai, which was a race of beings who inhabited the solar system long before the Hearthians did. You can find the other explorers of said space program using a signal locator, because one of the things I really like is each explorer has their own distinctive instrument that they use as their method of going, hey, I'm okay, I'm still safe, I'm alive, is they just sit around a campfire and they play a little tune on their instrument. So you've got one that has a banjo, and one has a drum, and one has a harmonica, etc., etc. You can also launch a scout that can take pictures as it flies into space, and you can recall it from anywhere using quantum mechanics, which quantum mechanics are something you're going to hear a lot if you play Outer Wilds. But basically, that's really what sums it up. The solar system is your oyster. You can go anywhere you want from minute one. There's no like upgrading your ship. There's no getting abilities or anything like that. It's just, if you know how to get there, then you can just go. Think of it as Breath of the Wild, but small. And in space. But yeah, you have complete freedom to explore the solar system until 22 minutes later, when the sun goes supernova and explodes. And you die. And everybody dies, actually, you know. And then you awake with a start. Back at the very beginning, right before you were set to take off on your voyage, and you seem to be the only one aware of what's happened. From here, every 22 minutes, the sun will explode, sending you back to that first moment, and it's up to you to use this time loop to your advantage to discover what's causing the sun's death, but also getting wrapped up in the mystery of what actually happened to the Nomai. And it's compared to Majora's Mask a lot, because time loop. But unlike Majora's Mask, when you go back to the beginning of the time loop, you haven't lost anything. You keep all of the information that you had before. There's a computer that constantly updates this web of connections and stuff that you can reference and look at. And so it just ends up being the entire point of the game is to try and figure out what is happening and, if possible, how you can stop it. And the questions basically become, why are you stuck in the loop? What happened to the Nomai, and what does it have to do with the eye of the universe that they were looking for? What is the Ash Twin project? And is there any way to stop the coming end? So, Peter, this is where I will ask, what are your experiences with Outer Wilds?
Or is it the Outer Wilds? No, honestly. Yeah, I always thought that was the title because of, as we said, with the Outer Worlds released in the same year. Like, how did that happen? That's just craziness.
Not even just released in the same year. Outer Worlds was announced a few months before Outer Wilds came out.
Yeah, so I just maybe people thought those were the same. I don't know. Anyway, I did know about the 22-minute loop. I have heard a lot of good things about it. But yeah, with the simple, if exploration is your thing, you like going into space, like this is your kind of game. I'm curious though, because that's literally all I know about it. Like, how long did it take you to play? How long does it take to discover the answers to these questions?
I'm not sure. It took, if I had to take a guess, maybe 10 hours. It's very hard to keep track of because I don't often survive to the end of the 22-minute loop because I'll make some stupid decision and crash my ship into some planet, and I'm really bad at landing. I can't land a spaceship. I should never be allowed to fly a spaceship. This is me saying on recording for the record, never let me pilot a spaceship under any circumstances whatsoever.
You hear that, NASA?
Yeah, just stop trying to recruit me, NASA. All those letters I get all the time. But yeah, if I had to take a guess, I'd say about 10, 15 hours. One review I read while doing research sort of explained it really well, I think, there is that 22-minute time limit, and it is like the end of your loop, whether you like it or not. But like, for the most part, the loop doesn't really matter. Once you figure out, like, all right, so next loop, I'm going to go over to Ash Twin to look into this thing that I learned about while I was exploring Giant's Deep. All right, in the next loop, I'm going to go check out Ember Twin and find out what's there. And it's very well built in the perfect amount of time to just be like, this is my one objective for this loop. And then, once you get that done, you might have time to go start looking into another objective. And I think the loop makes it a lot easier to play in bite-sized chunks. Because you can just be like, all right, I'm just going to do 2 or 3 loops, and then, all right, I'm done for the night.
It makes me think a lot of Minute.
Yeah, it's kind of just a longer lasting. I mean, it's a completely different game than Minute, but the logic is kind of the same. Yeah, in a lot of ways. It's such an interesting game. Like, it's one of the most interesting games I've ever played. I don't know if I'd ever go back and play it again, personally, because I've seen how bad I am at the 0G sections. Doing literally anything in 0G for me became an impossible task because my brain ain't built for that. But it's fun, and I do think it is worth a look if you have the ability to get a hold of it. And it did get kind of screwed over by Obsidian announcing the Outer Worlds, because for a good, like, the first 3 months or so, I know from some of the people I follow that if you were streaming Outer Wilds, people would come into your chat going, is this the Obsidian game? Did that come out? That came out?
Oh, no.
And that was just a thing that happened all the time. So, and that's not Obsidian's fault. That's not Digital's fault. The game had been in development for long before Outer Wilds. I almost did it right there. I almost called Outer Worlds Outer Wilds. We need to stop letting people name video games. Oh. But yeah, that's just sort of how it went. It was a raw deal, but they still made it through. And let's talk about how that game was made. So, director and designer Alex Beecham first began the project that would become Outer Wilds as his master's thesis at the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts specifically in the media and games program, which I guess I did not realize USC had that. That is very neat.
Oh, yeah. They're a big film and game centric and heavy university for sure. Again, on top of being the Trojans and all the sports things there.
Mm-hmm. And this would have been in around 2012 when this project would have basically began. And he said that his main idea had been to make a game that would recreate the, quote, spirit of space exploration that he felt films like Apollo 13 and 2001: A Space Odyssey really helped create and inspire in people that were watching those movies, while also making, quote, an objectiveless open world game where exploration would satiate the player's questions without feeling aimless, which sounds like a tall order, but I think at the end of the day, they did a pretty good job with that, honestly. He was also heavily inspired by The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker, specifically the exploration being driven by, quote, non-player characters that would tell tales of distant lands as to entice the players to explore those areas for themselves. He said in a couple of interviews that, like, while Majora's Mask is the Zelda game that a lot of people compare it to because of the whole time loop thing, he kind of feels like both Outer Wilds and Majora's Mask use the time loop mechanics in very, very different ways, and so he doesn't really agree with that comparison per se, if that makes sense, which it does kind of make sense. Meanwhile, the game has a lot of, like, rural camping aesthetic to it. Like, parts of your ship are made of wood. Like, your landing gear is planks of wood. It's neat. And he said that this aesthetic kind of came out of his interest in backpacking, which he felt also helped to drive home the idea that the player is a lonely space explorer who is far from home. You're not ever that far from home because you can basically, all the planets are about a 2-minute flight from each other. But the idea is that you are on another planet and everybody you know is on a different planet, essentially. So eventually he would build a team of other USC students as well as students from the Laguna College of Art and Design and the Atlantic University College, where they got together and they made this sort of master's thesis. And to do this, to figure out how this game was going to be, they would build ideas using a couple other non-video game formats. For instance, they began using a tabletop role-playing game to try and shape together a narrative that the game could potentially use. They also made a prototype in Unity, but then they also ended up writing the entire game as a text adventure using the software processing, which I wonder if they ever made that available anywhere, because that sounds fascinating. So when the project was shown off during a demo day at USC, it actually caught the eye of Japanese actor Masi Oka, who had recently founded his own studio, Mobius Digital. And they were created to develop mobile games, and he was so impressed with what he saw out of the prototype of this game that following graduation, he hired the entire team full-time to develop Outer Wilds into a full commercial release.
So Masi Oka from Heroes.
I think so.
Yeah, the actor from the TV show Heroes. Wow.
I didn't even think of, I forgot about that. Did he play Hero?
Yeah.
Or was he? Yeah, okay. Interesting. Somehow I didn't come across that while looking into this. That is a bizarre connection that I did not expect.
Yep, he's the one with Mobius Digital. Yeah, wow.
I wanted to go into how the sort of physics were sort of created in Outer Wilds, but I don't think I'm smart enough to do that. I don't know enough about the subject matter, so I'm just going to point you towards somebody who is, because Super Bunny Hop actually has a video where he talked to the developers about how they figured out these realistic orbiting physics and all that for these planets. It's a very, very interesting watch, and I 100% think that if you have any interest in that kind of thing, you should go watch that video and learn a bit more of that. So In terms of developing the game, in August of 2015, a crowdfunding campaign for Outer Wilds was launched on the new video game-centric investor-based service, Fig. How long's it been since you heard Fig?
Oh my gosh.
I can only name one other game that was funded on Fig, and that's Psychonauts 2.
That's right, yep.
But Outer Wilds was apparently the first game to ever be successfully funded using Fig. So that's really neat. But then 3 years later, in March of 2018, it was announced that the game was now being funded and published by Annapurna Interactive, with them having bought out the project and licensing rights from Fig, which I guess is part of Fig's platform? I don't know. At this point, the game was set for a 2018 release, and this is around the same time that they announced that the game would also be coming to Xbox, pretty much around the same time. And then there was this up-and-coming service that was making a lot of waves and a lot of controversial ways in the PC gaming space. In December of 2018, the team announced that the game would be delayed a few months into 2019, and that the PC release would be a timed exclusive that could only be bought through the Epic Games Store, in exchange for Epic's financial support. Now, personally, I think the Epic Games Store is a terrible service, but people that treat it like it's the second coming of the devil, like, no, man, it's just a bad storefront. That's it. That's all it is. And they give indies who get an exclusivity deal with them, they give them so much money that any indie developer would be an idiot to say no to it. So I think it's a little bit overblown, the hatred that the EGS gets, but this made Outer Wilds one of the first games of this exclusivity type that was publicly crowdfunded, which is something that has happened a few times since, and it sparked outrage a bit for moving exclusivity to Epic. There were people saying, well, the original crowdfunding campaign said that I would get a Steam code. Am I just not going to get a Steam code then? And specifically, though, backers who used Linux on their gaming PCs were especially upset because the Epic Games Store straight up did not have Linux support for its games. So they didn't get anything out of it. Which sucks. That absolutely sucks. We've seen Shenmue 3, I think, went through the same thing.
Yeah.
It's happened a couple of times now, and reminder that the Epic Games Store still doesn't have a cart function. Anyways, even with all that, Outer Wilds was very well reviewed overall. It is currently sitting at a Metacritic of 85. Many critics heavily praised its world building and narrative, which are top-notch, very well done, as well as the open-ended nature of its exploration, which is kind of like how we talk about Her Story or Paradise Killer last time, which is, you can go anywhere and do anything as long as you know what to look for. There's no track to take you anywhere. It's a very neat way to do space exploration of a relatively small area. But a few critics kind of brought up that the nature of the time loop mechanic could sometimes leave the player feeling like they had been interrupted in the middle of a puzzle, which I could see. I don't think there are many puzzles that take that long, outside of, I think, the very last one to get the true ending. But I could definitely see where they're coming from on that. Outer Wilds in 2015, when it was still the original student project, actually won the Excellence in Design and Seamus McNally Grand Prize Awards at the Independent Games Festival, which is pretty cool. But then after the full game released in 2019, it won Best Indie Game at the Golden Joysticks, as well as Best Game, Game Design, and Original Property at the BAFTAs. And it was also nominated for a ton of awards across the industry, including the Game Awards, DICE, GDC, and South by Southwest, as well as being nominated for multiple other categories at both the Golden Joysticks and the BAFTAs. So this game did make a few waves in the awards circuit. It might not have won a huge amount of awards, but it got recognized a good amount.
That's crazy. I didn't even know it won Best Game at the BAFTAs. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's insane. And for a lot of people, it was pretty high up on their list. Like a lot of journalists and industry people, it was pretty high on their list for like their favorite game of the year. I don't think it won Game of the Year for a lot of places, but you know. So the composer for Outer Wilds, his name is Andrew Prahlow. I wasn't able to find a huge amount on him. There's a lot of interviews with him specifically about the music of Outer Wilds, but not a lot about him. In terms of personal information, according to his Twitter, he was born on March 5th, no year attached to it. He's currently based in Los Angeles, and he began his career as an intern for composer John Powell while completing his graduate studies at USC, which also happens to be where he first met Alex Beecham. And then according to his website's About page, he describes his music as, quote, "It focuses on larger-than-life emotive soundscapes with a core of chamber ensemble minimalism, hoping to create a sense of familiar nostalgia for the listener." And you can follow him on Twitter at Andrew Prahlow. That's AndrewPrahlow. In terms of discography, the only other game that I can really find with him in the credits is a 2017 mobile VR game called Eclipse: Edge of Light. But his About page on his website happens to say that he was an assistant on music for the 2 TV shows Avatar: The Legend of Korra and Kung Fu Panda: Legends of Awesomeness, both Nickelodeon joints there. He also says that he has worked on various soundscapes for the Madden NFL game franchise. So, like, I assume that means, like, the crowd noise and stuff like that. I can't imagine what else it would be.
Well, that could be their story mode as well.
Maybe. But it specifically mentions it as soundscapes, not so much music. He also wrote an arrangement of the song Be Our Guest from Beauty and the Beast to be performed at the 2017 Oscars. That's neat. There are 2 quotes that he puts on his About page that I found kind of interesting. One is, quote, "Co-composed the track Reach the Sky for Disney's 2021 Epcot entrance soundtrack alongside Mark Petrie," and also says that he, quote, "also writes for trailer campaigns, including Star Wars, Avengers, Blade Runner 2049, and Star Trek." So he does a good amount in the music space. It's just not usually like stuff that's out in front, which makes Outer Wilds all that much more special. So let's get into some information about Outer Wilds' soundtrack. Like I said, I was able to find multiple interviews with Prahlow about this soundtrack specifically. So, while it didn't win any sound-based awards, it was nominated for Best Audio at the Golden Joysticks, and it was nominated for Excellence in Musical Score at South by Southwest, and nominated for Music at the BAFTAs. It was also nominated at GANG, the Game Audio Network Guild Awards, for Best Indie Game Music and Best Interactive Score, and it won the Best Game Music title from outlets like Giant Bomb and Only Single Player. Prahlow also served as the game's sound designer, it should be mentioned, which he does a great job. Every sound effect is so good in Outer Wilds. Just all of it, from flying to the roar of a monster that you can encounter to like just the act of your thrusters going. It's very good sound design. The soundtrack includes performances by Prahlow on guitar, banjo, harmonica, and synthesizers. He also recorded the cellist David Tagney to do a performance on the soundtrack. And one of the astronauts in the Outer Wilds space program, instead of having an instrument, he just whistles. And this whistling was provided by Alex Beecham himself. So a lot of the game is overall kind of musicless. When you're just sort of walking around planets, you're not usually going to hear music because, you're in an empty area. But when music does kick in, that's when you know that something is happening and something is occurring. You're in somewhere of significance. And when asked about whether this was intentional or not, Prahlow said, quote, "When there's constant looping music in an exploration game like Outer Wilds, the music can lose importance and become wallpaper. To avoid that and make the music stand out, I crafted the music to follow the player's sense of exploration." So it's all very context-based, whether or not music plays and what music plays and that kind of thing. Some locations do have their own music just all the way through, such as the town on Timberhearth has a very, very good piece that maybe you'll hear a bit of in a bit. And the foggy, unsettling Dark Bramble also has just this overbearing feeling to it, and they all really fit the planets that you're exploring. Though sometimes while you're just out in space, there's also a song that can play there, which we're going to get into all this in a bit. But most of the time when you're exploring a planet, there's just no music at all. It's just you and your astronaut breathing. He said he also wanted a differentiating line to be able to be drawn between the music of the Hearthians, representing your race, and the music of the Nomai, the music that was representing them. So Hearthian music is made using various folk instruments like a banjo or a harmonica. Meanwhile, Nomai music is much different and uses stuff like pianos and more electronic stuff. The Hearthian music is very inspired by the simple melodies in stuff like Zelda soundtracks. Meanwhile, when describing the Nomai music, Prahlow says that he tried to figure out a texture and focus resembling, quote, "a piano being ripped apart in space." Not sure if that's how I'd describe it, but I also really respect that description. So the music was meant to have an overall theme of connection, with all the various astronauts' melodies on their instrument being able to come together to make one song, even though they're all alone on different planets. And when asked about this, Prahlow said, quote, "Even back in the alpha and beta stages, Beecham and I always loved the idea of having them alone playing on separate planets, but really playing as a band all together. It creates a really cool concept of how we as humans can be emotionally connected no matter the distance. I love thinking about our purpose on this planet, that we live on this massive expanding universe, and through music, it gives us all an opportunity to connect and make it feel a little more like home." So let's jump in to the 5 critical tracks, starting with the main theme of the game. Critical track number 1 is Outer Wilds. Like I said, this is the main theme of the game. Most of the leitmotifs you'll hear, the parts here, are a good amount of the other astronauts' songs, their instruments, the things they play. I've been listening to this song on loop for a week, and it's just gorgeous. I adore this piece. It is by far my favorite song on the soundtrack. It's very simple, but just also really drives home that, like, this isn't going to be the music you generally expect out of a sci-fi game. Not at all. And I don't know, we've always talked about how everybody needs more banjos. And hey, look at this. Banjos.
Yeah, Prahlow delivers. This song makes me smile a lot. It's super neat. And yeah, I definitely get the sense of community here, like he's talking about with this. Like, it's a perfect example of that, and a really neat soundscape that you're absolutely right, you would not expect in a sci-fi game.
Yeah, and I think they really worked hard to differentiate their aesthetic from what people generally consider sci-fi to look like. Because, like I said, parts of your ship are made of wood. Like you're flying around in a tin can being held together by wood, and it's a miracle it can fly in the first place. There's a part at the very beginning of the game where you're doing all the tutorial stuff and you talk to one of the people on Timber Hearth. And they say, don't worry, I'm sure they made the landing pad less flammable than it used to be. And you have dialogue options, and one of them is, the landing pad is flammable? And their response is, I mean, it hasn't set on fire yet, so you're probably fine. And that's kind of the aesthetic it's all going with. And I think this song, it just has this positive energy to it that just feels nice to listen to. It's very good. For critical track number 2, though, we got to go see the bigger picture with Space. Like I said, there is music that sometimes plays when you're in space, and this is that music in case you didn't pick up on that. And I really, really love this piece too, because it's just this really atmospheric, almost soundscape type thing. And the reverb on the instruments, I think, is especially a lot of fun, because it really kind of, for me, drives home, no, you're in space. Space is huge. Space is so much bigger than you are. While also having some of the reversed instruments and stuff, like it's the time loop. That's where that's coming in. This song feels, to me now, feels quintessentially space. It's very good at painting a picture of how being in space probably feels like.
It's not the same instruments overall, but I kind of get vibes of Fez a little bit, where it's just like, you kind of get like, yeah, the reverb, the echo, like everything is so much grander than you are, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like it is a really good representation of, yeah, there is so much to explore, and yet you are somehow making progress, however much in that.
Yeah.
That's a really good representation. I could totally imagine like you kind of propelling your ship and floating through it all.
Yeah, it's very nice, especially when the loop is about to end and you jump into a black hole that sends you to the other side of the solar system, and you get to watch the sun explode. And this song is playing for a little bit before another song that'll be on this Critical 5 comes up, and it's just, it makes space feel nice. Sometimes it made me almost want to just sit and drift for a little while just to listen to it. It's very, very comforting almost.
I know space can be scary, but yeah, you don't want it to be scary when you're trying to encourage exploration.
Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of danger in this solar system. Boy, and that's not even talking about the sun that's about to kill us all. But yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. You need to make it feel nice that you weren't there. Anyways, I'm going to bring the mood down a little bit with critical track number 3. It is Nomai Ruins. I remember hearing this song for the first time when I walked into a place called the Hanging City on the planet of Brittle Hollow, which is an abandoned Nomai city. It's where they lived. They built it after they arrived. And this sort of piano part that you hear in the clip, for me, it really, really hammered home that like, oh, I'm walking through the end of a culture. Like, this whole culture used to be here and they're all gone now. And I'm just sort of walking through what's left. And I don't know, it really, really hits home in this very somber and powerful way. Like, you sort of get that feeling for a lot of times when you like come across Nomai stuff, but this was the first moment where I think this song played, and it just sort of, it's kind of an emotional gut punch, which isn't even the only one that this game has in store for you if you play it. And I think that's what I'm always going to remember of this song in general. And I think that's why I had to put it on the Critical 5.
Yeah, I think it's all of that. It's one, the totally different sound. I mean, for some people, it may not sound like much, but you put on good headphones and you'll feel that building bass to it. Like, there's, trust me, when I'm editing it, there's definitely a waveform here, and it's pretty neat to see, but it's definitely more sparse than that. But you also combine it with the great experience that you have like that. And it's just really powerful.
It's a very somber piece for a very, very, like, because it's easy sometimes to forget in games like this that, like, the implication is supposed to be these people were all alive and they were all doing this thing, and now they're just all gone, and you just happen to be somebody who's walking through the dust that remains, essentially. I don't know, it's a very, very powerful moment, and I don't think any game that I can think of has been as good at driving that feeling home than Outer Wilds was. Meanwhile, critical track number 4, though, is End Times. When this song plays, that means that once this song ends, the sun is going to explode. So the loop is coming to an end. This will play wherever you are, no matter what. And it's basically your signal to just be like, finish what you are doing fast, and then let's do it. Time to go back. So this is a very, very memorable piece because you're going to hear it a lot. And it just so happens to be one of the only tracks that I could find Prahlow having said something about specifically, saying, quote, "I wanted to capture the synth sounds from eras of game music from the late 1980s through modern day, hearing them as a unified sound. I used analog, digital, and some NES-emulated synths. This way I was able to combine all eras of modern game music into a huge pad with a memorable, minimalistic melody." I don't know if I can hear the NES synths, but I can totally hear that when it's explained that way.
I mean, maybe with enough processing, right? Because you definitely hear different kinds of synths there. But I think that's really cool that it's not an annoying piece, right? Because if it's playing at the end of the loop and you're going to hear it so many times, and it may be frustrating that it's like, oh man, already. But it's not something that like wears on you or like grinds on you in a bad way. I think that's a really good accomplishment, honestly.
Mm-hmm. This song's only like a minute long. And like I said, once it fades out, that's when the sun explodes. And then seconds later, you are dead. So it doesn't overstay its welcome. And it is just this sort of nice synth piece, basically. All right, critical track number 5. Let's get into another emotional thing. It is Travelers. The only thing I have written on the outline for this song is "One last song for the road with a new friend from long ago." So the true ending of Outer Wilds is a massive emotional gut punch, like huge, and is a really interesting ending that I will not give anything away. But as it's happening, this is the song you hear, because there comes a point where you have to gather all the members of this band, essentially, and you all sit around a campfire and they all play their song together for the first time the whole game. And it's just really, really emotional. Like, you even have the ability to, like, say goodbye to them if you want during this performance. It's something that the game builds up to really well and just feels correct. And I couldn't, despite this essentially just being Outer Wilds again, the first critical track, after seeing the true ending, I don't think I could not put this on the critical 5. I couldn't. It felt like it would have been a disservice to the narrative of Outer Wilds to not put it here.
That's really special, and I love hearing that and how the ending can make you feel all those things. Like, that's the power of games, and it's a nice piece on its own. But I feel like that's, we say it every now and then, but like that's the reason we do this show, is to like give proper credit to these moments, these songs, and especially how they all come together.
Yeah. This soundtrack, I think, overall is going to be one that sticks with me for a very long time. Like I said, I don't know if I'm ever going to replay the game, but I don't think I'm going to forget it anytime soon, both its soundtrack and the game itself. It's just that interesting and that sort of moving in a way that I don't know if I've ever seen in a game before. It's very odd, but great. Anyways, let's get on to the tracks on the cutting room floor. The first one is Timber Hearth. This is the song that plays when you're walking around your home planet, the village there, and talking to all the people that live there about how, yeah, you're about to go into space, man. That's awesome. I'm sure you definitely won't die. Oops. And also, while doing research, I looked at Prahlow's Twitter, and like 2 weeks ago, he tweeted that this song had hit over 2 million streams on Spotify, and he added that he, quote, originally I hoped the whole soundtrack would get 10,000 plays in total. And now this one song has 2 million. You love to see it.
That's incredible. At the same time, though, I feel like he was on track for success with all the different connections he was making, but I can get how it can feel like it's just going to be a game no one's going to notice, and then bang. I mean, but also come on, like you had the funding from Fig. Like, I think this game was certainly going places. But wow, I think this song is up there with Outer Wilds for me, as like if I had to pick a favorite. Like, just love the guitar sound, whether it's that the banjo from Outer Wilds. Like, it's a really nice, full, pleasant sounding piece.
Yeah, this song, it kind of hurt to not put it in the critical 5, but I had other songs that I really felt needed to be there. But this would have totally, if it was a critical 6, this one would be there. Bar none. Well, it wouldn't be there, but I also feel like it needs to be given some credit. It's my second track on the cutting room floor, Dark Bramble. So the music in the Dark Bramble is kind of this low, deep, atmospheric hum that just kind of feels like it's wrong and bad, because the Dark Bramble is wrong and bad. It is this area filled with like these little seeds that are bigger on the inside than they are on the outside. And they're like messing with space in weird ways. And there's a bunch of anglerfish that live in the Dark Bramble. And they will eat you if they hear your engines at any point. They will attack. They're a problem. So the Dark Bramble is kind of this place that feels wrong. And I think this song really, really drives that feeling home.
Yeah, I'm distraught and upset. Yeah, unsettled is a good word.
I don't like going into the Dark Bramble. You have to for the true end multiple times. I don't like going into the Dark Bramble. It's scary and I'm just a boy. So what will I never forget about Outer Wilds? The main lesson is that I am definitely not an astronaut, and I am 100% not cut out to be an astronaut. Me trying to do anything in any sort of zero-G environment was like trying to watch a baby drive a car. It just wasn't gonna work at any point. And that's on me. That's not on the game. That's me. I'm bad at that. But also just in a more serious note, like I've mentioned multiple parts that just sort of really emotionally resonated with me, and I'm very happy to have experienced them. Finally, I've been meaning to play Outer Wilds for a couple years now, and I mainly put it on the episode tracker to basically like, okay, I have to have played it by now. And that was a way to force my hand on it. And I have a couple other games coming up that I'm going to need to do that with too. But for the most part, yeah, it's a really, really great experience. Not one that I think I'm going to want to have again for a very long time. But as it is, like it's going to stick with me for a while.
As of right now, in North America, Outer Wilds is available on Xbox Game Pass on console. So, if that's your thing, like it is for me, I'm definitely more on the fence of I may give this one a shot now.
You absolutely should. There are some frustrating parts. I think the way to get the true ending is a whole process and is very, very frustrating for the most part, but as a whole, it is just a very, very cool experience that I think you would really enjoy.
So, in Ratchet and Clank, you don't fly to the different planets yourself, but you're still going through space to different planets, and I feel like that's the thread between the two games this week with 2016's Ratchet and Clank and Outer Wilds, which I now have to commit to my mind. It is Outer Wilds and not the Outer Wilds or the Outer Worlds. That's a whole different game.
For like a year after both games came out, the people that I learned about our Outer Wilds from literally made that mistake multiple times. One of them emailed Obsidian's PR department to try and get an early streaming code for Outer Worlds and accidentally wrote it as he was looking for a code for Outer Wilds.
Oh no.
Like it's a problem. And it's not a problem that is anybody's fault, but it's an unfortunate sequence of events, basically.
As one I think we all have to get better at, but I'm sure all parties are used to at this point. In the meantime, that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at StringPixel, and that's a new Twitter account for him, so if you followed him on his other account, you should go follow him at StringPixel.
I promise I have not stupid things to say. No, I'm just kidding. I have nothing but stupid things to say.
The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasher Pieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasher Pieces and Original Soundchat on podcast services all around the globe. Wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify. We have a Spotify feed of episodes and bonus tracks and all that, but we also have a Spotify playlist. Joe, anything being added to that Spotify playlist this week when we talk about games and the songs that they have, if anything's on Spotify, gets added. What's being added? Anything?
Well, like I said, Ratchet and Clank, the movie is there, but not the game, which is still weird to me. But Outer Wilds is on Spotify, so those songs will show up on the playlist.
Excellent. Well, then when you're done listening, you can find us on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us, how we're doing with these episodes. Games that you'd like us to cover, leave some suggestions. That's one of our big goals for 2021, is to cover more of those games. In the meantime, in the future, we'll have some status update on our merch site and some bonus tracks coming your way. But Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Mark Mothersbaugh.
I will be talking about Stuart Copeland. That'll be an interesting set of games there as well. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
So, luckily, there is no shortage of people covering the main theme of the game. And I found one by a YouTuber named Nizar Osmani. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. It's Nizar and Osmani, who did a cover of the Traveler's theme with just a bunch of different instruments that he plays. And it's super, super good. So please enjoy that.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.